it Cicero, after the Roman orator Cicero, who like basically came up with what it means to be a good public speaker, and we introduce it as a interpersonal skill training platform where you can like train skills like public speaking or like doing job interviews or giving lectures or whatever in front of a virtual audience framework. And I'd like to like present this work today because we had the lecture about study design and like user studies last time on Monday, and really Cicero, we have done quite extensive work that ranges from, on the one hand side, from user studies where we invite people in, we have them train with the system, we investigate like if they get better, what they perceive, how they felt like. We then do machine learning experiments to assess like can we pick up behaviors or changes in their performance that the human experts also pick up. And then the third like part is going to be about like how do humans perceive the virtual audience? Can we manipulate the audience so that we can produce feedback to the user that they learn how to give a public presentation? So the interaction loop that I brought up earlier in the class is really like what's used in this framework. And on the one hand side, on the one hand, we have the perception where we do voice analysis, gestural analysis, facial expression analysis, and we want to relate that to a good public speaking behavior. And for that, we build an interpretation module that, in our case, takes ensembles of decision trees and we use these behaviors that come from this perception module in the decision tree model to give an assessment or to automatically assess how the individual is doing. And we produce then nonverbal behavior in the virtual agents to give feedback. And really this is kind of like the loop that comes together in this project Cicero that I'll talk about a little bit now. And let's try if the audio is on. I think it should be. So basically what I would like to show you now is a little bit of a motivation of like why we're doing this. So this guy here, he is performing in the World Championship of Public Speaking.
He wrote his life story down in a journal with a twist. It was a poem, one long poem from start to finish. And this from a man who never went to school.
So you can see he's basically using the stage, he uses gestures, he does the rule of three, one long poem, he changes his voice, he emphasizes, and he even like turns himself around if he's talking about the past and stuff like that. So he's like using his entire body and the entirety of like his abilities to express to support the message that he wants to give in this public presentation. And this is how he trains.
This story is about passion, obsession, and blood.
So he talks to pillows, right? And at the ICT we thought, well, we do virtual humans, we can do better than pillows, right? And I mean, at least better than, you can draw faces, and it would be already better, right? So what we came up with is this framework. And basically the vision of our framework is to first get multimodal behavior tracking that we have kind of like out of the box. We have that available through Multisense. You guys have this available too through the Virtual Human Toolkit. Basically, we track facial expressions, gaze, gestures, voice quality, and we then want to interpret like how well the person is doing. We don't just want to know how well they're doing overall, but we want to know on a base, like on different levels, like the flow of speech or the gesture usage or the facial expressions, do they fit a good public speaking performance? And so we track like 10 different categories here with varying success. Some of those like categories we really are not really good at. For example, we track one that's called confidence. It's such a weird kind of like a complex concept that it is really hard to train a machine learning algorithm to learn this concept. But it's easier to, for example, like measure something like flow of speech. And then we found that a lot of these measures are correlated with each other, so we can actually infer confidence through the other performances. And then the last point is that we then want to produce feedback through the virtual audience for the user who's here and teach them how to get better. And we're going to start off with investigating like what this feedback should look like. So I'm going to present a study that we conducted where we wanted to know which type of feedback is the best. And we have 3 types of feedback. No feedback, so the virtual audience is static, like doesn't do anything. So that's our baseline. And it's always kind of like cool if you have a baseline because you want to know like what your additional like your idea or what your hypothesis brings to the table. You want to have a baseline. You kind of want to have a fair baseline. You don't want to have like a baseline as an actual audience. Like that's intimidating. That's different. Like so what we thought we'd just do like a static virtual audience. They do breathe, the virtual humans, so they don't look dead, but they don't do much more. Then we have a secondary hypothesis that, for example, we can give direct feedback. So in the virtual audience, like augmented reality, you stand in front of an audience, you have like a red to green bar at the back, and that turns green if you're doing well, and turns red if you're doing badly. Okay, and so that was kind of like our control condition, or like the direct feedback condition where we provide direct feedback. And then we have the third condition is where these guys are actually behaving. They change their postures, they lean forward if they're interested, they smile at you, they nod, and they like shake their heads if you're doing badly, okay? So let's look into this. This is how it worked. We got 45 participants, we tried to get 15 in each. One of those guys we had to throw away, and we had like an additional one in this condition. So we have in the control conditions, a non-interactive virtual audience, 15 direct feedback virtual audience, 14, and in the fully interactive virtual audience, we got 16 people. In order to assess if they get better, we also need to create a baseline for the individual, right? We need to know how good people are when they come to ICT. So we did a pre-training test, okay? Then we had them test twice, or like train twice with the virtual audience. And each individual either went this path, or this path, or this path. So none of them like saw different like conditions. And in both the pre-training and the post-training test, we had the virtual audience static as in this condition. Okay, they didn't behave, they didn't move. So that didn't seem awkward to them. So 45 participants, 4 presentations each. And we always, like when we talk about results, we always compare pre versus post-training. And we throw away this data for the analysis, but because we just want to know how well they got, or how much better they got in the test scenarios. For experts, we both have online experts. I'm not going to present those results. So we have like Mechanical Turk, lay people, annotate the data, but also we have 3 Toastmasters experts. Those guys are kind of like an organization dedicated to good public speaking, so they want to learn how to give toasts. It's kind of fun. And we also manually annotated the performances on 2 objective measures. Like in the literature, if you look, public speaking performances are bad if you have too many ums and ahs. So I'm trying to avoid that. Like you don't use pause fillers, just pause. That's kind of like one of the things that also these Toastmasters told us. And the other thing is that we wanted to know how often the presenter is looking at the slides or at the computer or away versus at the audience. And so individuals that look at audiences more tend to be perceived as better speakers. The interesting part here, though, is that it's not that easy. Like, it's not just how much you look at an audience, it's also how you look at the audience. And I heard recently that I'm supposed to look at one person, finish a thought, and then move to the next person and finish the thought. So it's kind of like this kind of idea of connecting with one person for one thought, finishing that, and then engaging with the next person for the next thought, so that you have kind of get the attention of individuals rather than trying to sway over the entire audience. But I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not an expert in this. It's part of why we built this. All right. So what happens next? We have 3 feedback strategies. I already talked about that. So we have the static feedback condition where they look like this. We have the direct feedback condition where they are static, but then we have this green to red bar that goes back and forth. And then we also have the interactive virtual audience where they lean back or lean forward and smile at you and shake their heads and stuff like that to give you feedback. And obviously, because we are the ICT, we want this to win. So we'll see if we win or not. We have 3 evaluation strategies. And I like that idea that you don't just want to evaluate your system or your study with just one measure, and you might be lucky, but you would fail in other measures. So we really try to investigate if the individual themselves, so that's the first one, the learner's point of view, feels that this is useful. We want to know if the expert thinks that they got better, and we want to know if the objective assessment holds true that they got better. Okay? So a 3-way kind of analysis or evaluation strategy that we employ here. I mean, this is a bit excessive. For the course project, for example, you don't really need to do something like that. So that's not entirely necessary. You could have just 2 and have the objective assessment basically be the feature extraction and feature analysis statistical tests on that. So what you're doing for homework 1, and then the machine learning approach as the secondary one. So that would be enough for that. But this is kind of a nice thing to do if you want to publish in a good journal. Yes?
What were the 2 objective measures?
The 2 objective measures were eye gaze. So if the user was looking at the audience, the virtual audience, or not, and how much. So that was basically just a ratio between the entire length of the presentation and how much they looked at the audience. And then the pause fillers, how many times they said and and ooh, and stuff like that.
These objective measures were based on information given by the Toastmaster experts.
Yeah, so the Toastmasters told us, look for those objective measures. You can count those. And then we just had 2 annotators count them. And I have some Krippendorf alpha values as well for the annotators. So so we're teaching what we're doing.
But sometimes, say for example, there is a study about which is less painful.
Mm-hmm.
Pulling off a band-aid immediately or pulling it step by step. Yeah. But what that proved was what might be considered consensus even among the experts might not necessarily be verified through support.
Yeah. So also experts fail. They don't know everything about the stuff, but and you'll see that these 2 objective measures that we chose, they are not necessarily corresponding to what the experts actually annotate in the end. So I don't want to take away too much, but I think there's more to, for example, the gaze measure than just looking at how much the person looks at the virtual lines or how little. So it's kind of, there's more to the story than an expert will tell you in a 5-minute conversation, right? So that's always the case, okay? All right, we had 3 research questions. So first, which feedback strategy provides the most engaging and learning experience? And that's kind of like the learner's point of view. We had the second one, which feedback strategy leads to the most improvement as assessed by the experts? And then the third one is like what feedback strategy like results in the best objective assessment. So like one research question for each evaluation strategy, okay? And these could be also formulated as hypotheses. If you want to say, we hypothesize that the interactive virtual audience framework is the most engaging. We hypothesize that the interactive virtual audience is like giving the most to the learner to get better and stuff like that. So you can form research questions or hypotheses. I mean, it's kind of like the same. All right. So this is kind of like how the personal itemized questionnaire looked like. We used like Google Docs or like Qualtrics for that. I think it was Qualtrics, but this one is from Google. We did expert assessments as well. They looked like this. They got 2 videos here. They played a video, made their thoughts about the video, then they played the next video, had their thoughts about the video, and then they annotated based on a relative scale, like I like the eye contact better in the left video versus I like the eye contact better in the right video. They had to choose like one of those things. And what happened is that we randomized the position of pre and post video in this form for each rater, right? So they didn't know if this was the pre-training or the post-training video, okay? So that's important for like to not bias the expert. All right, they rated it on 10 categories. So this is what like the correlations between each expert and the overall performance looked like. And what you can see basically are a few things, that the confidence level seems to be one of the most important like measures that correlate with the overall performance for every expert. Like all 3 experts rate that very highly consistently. But others, for example, like here, avoids pause fillers. This guy only correlates 50, and this guy correlates with 0.77. So it seems like the expert 3 puts more emphasis on that. And in general, the expert 3 seems to be kind of like annotating everything about the same. Like they don't really change too much from the overall improvement. While this guy here seems to like vary a little bit more. Okay? So this is kind of like an interesting point where we can see that every expert kind of has a different like focus of attention. And the inter-rater agreement was not the greatest, but like for each of those values to be on the same Likert scale or plus or minus 1 for each of the 3 experts was between 63 and 81%. So that was kind of like one of our measures there that we used. If you use Krippendorff alpha in this case, you get very poor alignment, I must say. So it will be like 0.4 or 0.3, something like that. So it's pretty bad. If you just use the raw Krippendorff values, we use like an interclass correlation or like an interclass reliability measure here. For the manual annotations of agreement for eye contact and pause fillers, however, we have a very strong Krippendorff alpha value for both of those categories. For pause fillers, they almost entirely agree on every single item, so they might have like missed one or counted one too many at some point. But yeah, we had 2 annotators annotate everything. And for the assessment, if people got better, we used a normalized difference index, which is basically the value post minus the value pre. So this is post-training minus pre-training. divided by post plus pre-training, and that kind of gives you a value of -121, so that we have like a relative change of performance rather than an absolute change. Okay, so let's look at, so this, we kind of went through this. Okay. Yeah, so this is just the overview of the, I thought I threw out those things. Yeah. So the first result that we got is when we look at the question 1, where we look at the learner's point of view. And so what we find here is that actually it holds true. What we wanted to happen is that the interactive virtual audience seems to be most successful in holding the individual's or the participant's attention. And we have significant difference. So this is like our ANOVA. This is the test where we say, okay, is there a difference in the variances between those 3 groups? And should we do post hoc analysis? So we have a pretty strong significant effect that there are differences between those. You can actually see this. So here you have like the standard error for these guys, and so in here you see like a standard like error bar kind of plot. I made this one with R, and I like colored it nicely so that the people see it better. And then we did post hoc analysis, and we found with 2 consecutive t-tests that this guy here always outperforms these 2, and it's a 0.5 significance here and a 0.01 significance here. So that's kind of like indicated with these stars and the 2 stars. And so this is kind of like how I would like to see plots be made, like where you have clearly labeled both axes. Everybody knows what the axes look like. Then you want to know, okay, what is the error bar? So this is the mean value here. But then you also add like a standard error. You can add a standard deviation if you like. Standard deviation often is a lot wider than the standard error. And for the t-test, it would not be like if you use standard deviation here, they would overlap likely, and you could still have a significant result. But if you use the standard error for these and they would overlap, you immediately see that there's no significant difference. But if they are not overlapping, you immediately see that there is a significant difference. Okay, so that's kind of like why we use the standard error here. And then I'd like to see those brackets. I'd like to know, like, okay, from looking at the graph, what is significantly different, right? What behavior do I observe as different in the positive or sentiment versus negative sentiment behavior? So you could easily change this into like positive, neutral, negative, and then have smile intensity here, something like that, okay? Or use of positive words. So that's really like just as an example of like how I think this could look like. What are we missing in this plot though? So in plots like this, the bar plot, you conserve some information, but you also don't see some other information. Like, for example, in a box plot, you could see something else, right? In a box plot, you see the maximum and the minimum with like the outliers that are plotted. You also see the interquartile range, like the 25th quartile versus the 75th quartile plus the median. We don't see the median value here. That could be like down here, the median, or it could be up here. But what we plot here is the mean value, okay? So there are differences there. Just be aware about that. If you, for example, report in your text the median value so-and-so, and like they're significantly different, and then you plot the bar plot and it actually plots the mean value, that's a very different story, okay? So you want to be consistent between the text and the plot. And you also don't want to plot the bar plot if you're really interested in like the range of those values either, okay? So that's kind of like a couple of ideas there that you should consider. All right, so moving on to question 2. Yeah, so this like most interesting. Moving on to question 2, well, again, we've observed a very strong difference between the groups. We had an ANOVA here. Again, this is the combined improvement, like the normalized difference index again. And what we see is now that the control and the interactive virtual audience both perform better than the direct feedback condition. Well, it's not exactly what we wanted to happen, but it's good that like this one's still, like the mean is a little bit above that one, but there's no significant difference between the two. So what basically that tells us is giving presentations in front of something that doesn't distract you and doesn't destroy what you're learning is okay, right? So like training in front of pillows might be okay. But maybe this is a little bit better because combined with this, that might be a bit stronger, but like this is just interpretation and this is really something that we haven't investigated yet. But again, bar plots, don't forget the brackets to see like what's going on, okay? And now, the objective assessment, well, here we actually found no significant difference. So the ANOVA that we did between the groups in the objective assessment didn't lead to any significant differences in the variances of the 3 groups, so no t-tests to do, right? But we thought maybe there's still something in there, and what we wanted to know is if you come to train with Cicero for the first time and you're really bad at holding eye contact with the virtual audience, and then you train a little bit, and then you try it again, like, did you improve? And if you come to present to Cicero and you're already really good at like looking at the audience continuously, and then you get to train and you like do it again, did you improve more, or like what happened there? And what we found is that actually weak speakers improved a hell of a lot more than the speakers that were already really good. And that makes a lot of sense because like if you're already looking at the virtual audience and we just look at like how much time do people spend looking at the virtual audience and no difference in like the dynamics or like how my gaze patterns look like, well, if you already look at the audience for 99% of the time, you can't really get better than that. You can look at it 100% of the time, but like that's a minimal improvement if you look at it this way, okay? So this is kind of like one of the results that we had there. That weak speakers get a lot better, while moderate and good speakers don't really improve, but there's still a significant difference between those. And this is kind of like consistent with a lot of like intelligent tutoring systems literature where individuals that bring already a great skill set to the table are not going to get a lot better through those systems, but a lot of people that bring like zero skill set to the table, they might improve through this system. And so that's kind of like what we took away from this. Okay. Some conclusions. Well, it's very engaging and captivating. There's consistent improvement in both control and the virtual audience condition. And there seems to be consistent improvement throughout all the speakers, but the individuals that gain most objectively are those that bring a lower skill set or maybe more anxiety to the table, okay? Takeaway message, we say that the interactive virtual audience kind of combines the best of 2 worlds. It increases the engagement and challenge and improves the skill set. So it's kind of like combining question 1 and 2 together and allowing question 3 to support this argument. Okay, are there any questions to like this user study that we did there?
I have a stupid question.
Yeah.
You only had them have 4 presentations.
Yes.
Would there be any difference if they would have 3 months of training?
Yeah, and this is really like, so the project is not over yet, and it's, we have like 1.5 years kind of left, and this is really what we want to do. So you'll see at the end like right now, there's no picture right now, but so in this study, the virtual audience was the same individual repeatedly, and it was kind of creepy and like weird. So now we took a year, we improved the virtual audience, we allowed them to have a lot more versatile behaviors. They look a lot better now, and they're very diverse. And now we really want to do like a longitudinal study where we want to like have people come in, train with it, and then like leave for a week or two, come back, train with it again, and so on. And then in the end, we would really love to have like a transfer test where individuals give a presentation in front of a real audience, like you guys, right? So because that's ultimately what we want to do, right? We don't want to train people to be good in presenting in front of a virtual audience. We want to train them to be good presenters in front of a real audience, right? So that's the totally different kind of like scenario there. Yeah, but that's really what we would love to do. And we're kind of like trying to negotiate with like the business school and stuff, and like have them like allow us to like track one class and everybody gives presentations. At like they learn public speaking in class, but then they
say the law school right across the hall would be probably perceptive audience for something like this.
Yeah, we really got to do this. I think that would be kind of cool.
For the objective function, I mean, I guess seems fine, but isn't that too narrow? Like, just judging by the eye gaze itself, whether the person has improved over a period of time.
Yeah.
So it would be better from, like, say, from an audience perspective to see how the audience have gained the information from the speaker.
Right.
As an objective function.
Totally, and you're totally right there. But we did what's easy in that study. So, like, if you want to predict if a person got really better by like asking virtual humans about like how much they got from the presentation, that's really something that we need to model at some point. But the ideal situation would be where we ask an actual audience to like give an assessment in life, like in a live scenario where you have the person present in front of the real audience. Directly, and with the experts, for example, they only just watched the video, right? They weren't there while it happened. So yeah, there is a lot of caveats to this study, but in the end, I think it proves a little point where it could be interesting to like investigate this further.
Did the speakers get any specific feedback on their presentations other than just the input from the audience?
They did not. So they got zero feedback directly. So we didn't tell them like you did well or you did badly. From the direct, from the control condition, they didn't get any feedback. From the direct feedback, they only like interpret. They got like a little verbiage which said green is good, red is bad. So try to keep the bar as green as possible. And the other one, the virtual audience gives you feedback non-verbally. Try to keep them engaged and happy. And so that was the only feedback that we got. And I should have said that one training presentation was focusing on like the reduction of pause fillers. So we told them pause fillers are bad. Try to avoid them. And that was the control condition like that they read. And then in the second one, direct feedback condition, pause fillers are bad, try to avoid them. The audience, the green bar gives you feedback. And then the third one was like, pause fillers are bad, try to avoid them. The virtual audience gives you feedback with non-verbal behavior. Yeah.
I'm just curious, what all factors were there, like in interactive virtual audience, they like lean forward, lean backward. So what all factors were taken into consideration to take care of that situation?
So we know that, for example, like we don't have to make the audience like super realistic. Like it doesn't have to be crazy realistic. It could be just like it could be stuffed animals that give you some feedback if it helps you. So we exaggerated the behaviors a lot. So they are like and leaning backwards. They were pretty exaggerated behaviors, and we just wanted to see if that helps or distracts or whatever. It was kind of like the first iteration. But let me go a little bit forward now. We're almost out of time actually. So did the two discussion groups, did you prepare, because we changed kind of like the schedule a little bit? Do we have one? Do we have the second one as well? Yeah, you got it? Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll try to go a little bit faster through this. It's kind of, maybe I'm not going faster and I'll continue on Monday or something like that, but because I think this example should really show you like a complete walkthrough, like through study design, study analysis, machine learning experiments, and then at the end also like some evaluation of the feedback that the virtual audience gives. So now I want to talk about the automatic performance assessment that we conduct in Cicero, where we actually really like, so we move from the perception to the interpretation part now. And these are the features that we get from the perception. So we get like gaze and smile behavior. We get a secondary gaze behavior, which basically is the like more rigid like head gaze, which is easier to track. And it was a pretty dark room, so we trust the tracking of the head more than the tracking of the eyes. So this is actually eye gaze tracking. This is gaze tracking based off the head. We get facial expressions like smiles and like eyebrow raise and like general expressivity measures. And then we also get Kinect measures like with posture, like how much do they move and stuff like that, okay? So we want to know if they're looking at the audience and how they move. The acoustic measures we get from Kovarev. We're interested in like pitch, so that's kind of like basically the voice modulations, like how do I speak a lot, like does my voice change, am I expressive, am I loud enough with the, we have it here, speech intensity, am I loud enough, am I too quiet, the voice quality, we were hypothesizing that the voice quality, if I talk like this all the time, I don't feel very confident, but if I talk confident and like loud and tense, I might sound a bit more confident and maybe a better performance overall. This is based off of some prior work that we did on politicians, like how they are perceived. We took some low-level politicians from the German parliament that nobody knows, and we showed them to individuals. That's also a nice study that we did there. Then we use some prod features, which are basically just speech rate, syllables per breath group, and so on. So that's kind of like the acoustic and the visual features that we used. And then what we extract from those features are basically temporal information through mean and standard deviation. So we want to know, does it change over time, and like what's the overall value over time, okay? So that's not very sophisticated, but like again, it's good enough for this study. And also, we used again this normalized difference index, which is post minus pre divided by post plus pre, to normalize all the features and to remove kind of like the baseline of, for example, gender, like the pitch value for male and female participants is just different because of their gender, but we really wanted to remove that difference and like kind of normalize it in between, okay? So we had again like 3 different research questions. The first research question was which behaviors, acoustic and visual behaviors, relate to good public speaking performances. And we want to know like which features are correlated with improving overall, okay? And some of the things that we found is that, for example, with respect to flow of speech, we're not very surprised about this, that, well, if flow of speech is perceived well, the standard deviation of MFCC 0, which is very strongly related to the speech intensity, is actually significantly higher. So if you modulate your voice intensity a lot, your flow of speech is kind of good, okay? And the same with intensity, but those two are very strongly correlated themselves. And then what we also find is that the ratio between speech and pause times and the standard deviation of that is negatively correlated. So that means that if you vary a lot between like talking very fast and very long, and then pausing for a minute, and then talking very fast and very long, so that is negatively correlated with a good flow of speech. So what you want is you want to have a constant kind of ratio between pause and speech times, so that the entropy kind of like doesn't change too much. And I visualize this here, where you want actually low entropy between voiced and unvoiced, and you want to kind of decrease the entropy between speech and no speech to give a good or a constant kind of ratio between pause and speech times. For eye contact, what is also interesting again, well, hey, we got good eye contact behavior. Like if we look at the gaze that we extract using OCAL, if you gaze at the virtual audience more, experts think that your eye contact behavior is good. So that's interesting, but it's not significant. You don't see a star here. So it's not too strong. But again, this thing here is there again. So that's kind of surprising, but we found that this ratio here is significant for all of them. Like so it like for all 10 categories, and it's kind of surprising to us, but who knows? Like so here, for example, for gesture usage, even like that feature is still there. So in the end, we feel like that this feature seems to be like a one-to-one relationship between good and bad public speaking, which I think is kind of surprising. Anyways, we also developed like a gesture indicator that tracks like how much you gesture, and that seems to be correlated with gesture usage. For intonation, a good higher pitch and a variation in voice quality features and a variation in the first formant. That means like you're like expressing voice clearly and dynamically seems to work out quite well. And for confidence, we find that again like a variety of features seem to be significantly correlated. Okay, and I could go on for like all the 10 kind of categories, but I think you get the point that there are certain behaviors that are related to good or bad public speaking behavior. In this case, we didn't do any t-tests because we don't have good versus bad speakers, but we have a range of good to bad public speaking behavior or improvement. And in all the cases, we're relating behavior that we observe to improvement or no improvement, okay? So that's kind of like the gist here. All right. So the question 2 that we had in this work is, can we automatically predict public speaking performance using machine learning? In this case, we used a decision tree ensemble. That's just a bunch of decision trees, and they are in fact regression trees, because we want to get a value of getting better or staying the same or getting worse. Okay, we don't want to get absolute values. And we use some feature selection, where in this case sequential forward feature selection is the following. The ensemble starts off with 0 features and it doesn't have access to any feature. Then it chooses the one feature among all the features. So for example, here would be the pause-to-speech ratio. Would choose the best one and say, okay, now I use this to correlate or to build my ensemble to find out who is a good or a bad public speaker, or who got better, who got worse. And then you choose the next one, and then you choose the next one, and then you stop if your performance doesn't improve anymore. Okay, so it's kind of the forward feature selection. And we, yes?
You just mentioned you use decision trees, but how would you use a regression? Because I think decision trees would give you a classification rather than regression.
So that's actually really easy to do. Instead of improving, so I don't know if you remember the if I have my decision node here and I split up my set into 2, and now I have circles and squares here, right? And so I choose this node here based off of what to split those.
Yeah.
What is the criteria?
I mean,
It's like entropy, right? So I want entropy to go down, right? So here I have bad entropy because it's 3 squares and 3 circles. But maybe I have like 3 circles here, so that's the reason why I split this, okay? And now if you want, and here I can now make a decision. Oh, I go over here, yeah, it's circles, but here I still need to split, okay? So I still split here, and I choose entropy again as my criterion to split. In a regression tree, each of those points are actually circles, right? But they have values associated like 1.5, 1.2, 1.3, and so on, okay? So now you don't want to reduce entropy because entropy with real numbers is kind of pointless. But what you want to reduce now is the mean, or like the standard deviation between those values. So like if they all have about the same value, like 1.5, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and so on, then that's a good split. Okay, so you just change your split criterion, and then you have this regression tree. And
so basically, instead of minimizing the entropy or maximizing the information gain, you are trying to reduce the standard deviation among the members.
Exactly. So the interclass, what was it? No, intra-class variability or something, or intra-group variability. And then if you're at the leaf node, so you don't want to do a split anymore, you just take the mean value as the output of the regression. That's it. Okay? So it's a very simple change. Okay. And what we found is really cool. Multimodal works best. So with visual, and this is a little bit sad because I don't like visual features that much, so I don't pay attention too much to them. So they are not that great. And it's interesting that, for example, like even like body posture gets badly classified with visual features and better classified with audio features, which is kind of weird. But the reason is because all of those 10 categories are super correlated with each other. So like really there's this caveat here. But what's cool is that if we combine acoustic and visual features, we get a lot better, and red is really good here. And in fact, we get a really good performance and overall correlation with the expert opinion. So 0.7 is like highly significant correlation there. We can also see how this looks like when we compare mean absolute error with the actual label that the experts provide on our ensemble, which is the audiovisual versus the baseline, and here red is bad. And again, we kind of win against the baseline, which is kind of cool. Okay? So that's a kind of like a different viewpoint. So on one side, you evaluate your results with some correlation analysis, and the other one, you evaluate it with a mean absolute error evaluation. Okay? The third question that we asked in this study is, so are experts actually assessing what they're supposed to assess? If I tell an expert, look at the person's pause-filler behavior, do they like annotate, or do they classify this person that has low pause-filler ratings, so they use no pause-fillers? Do they like rate this as good pause-filler behavior, or did they kind of get distracted by something else and annotate something different, like the overall performance or the confidence? And it's just like, I think he did really well in the pause-fillers this time, right? So kind of like just to make a double check, like do experts annotate what they're supposed to do? And does the automatic assessment provide a better alternative, or a different alternative in this case? So what we do is we correlate the expert assessment with the automatic behavior, and the automatic behavior with the manual annotations that we did, okay? So we did manual annotations on pause-fillers and eye gaze, and now we correlate those measures with the expert assessments on eye gaze and pause-fillers and the automatic assessment of eye gaze. We didn't have one for pause fillers. So what we find is for pause fillers, there is no correlation whatsoever. When individuals use less pause fillers, experts don't rate them accordingly. So they suck at this. Like they're not good at that. With eye gaze, there is still no significant correlation. However, our automatic approach gives us a very strong correlation. Okay? So what that means, in fact, is that what they annotate in this category is not related to the overall ratio that I spend looking at an audience. It's very different. And this is kind of like a warning sign for us, well, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't use this simple measure, but we need to do more to identify, okay, what is actually good eye gaze behavior. And by the way, if anybody's interested, we haven't done this analysis yet, so there will be some open experiments there. So yeah, kind of like the takeaway message is it's difficult to assess public speaking performance automatically. You can't just use the first measure that comes to mind. The experts have different foci. One expert might look more at the flow of speech, one might look more at the gestures, and so on. And it's very hard to quantify improvement, and the eye gaze ratio does not reflect good eye gaze behavior. So experts don't count. So that's one idea that we had. Like experts don't go into the assessment and like take notes of like every single pause filler that individuals did. They basically get an overall assessment of the performance, like a qualitative assessment, and yeah, like machines count. That's what computers do best, but humans don't. Like we just don't count that way, and we don't like count the time that you spend looking at the audience. There's something else about the quality of gaze behaviors. So some conclusions here. We looked at various features. We found that, for example, the pause ratio of speech and the ratio of speech and pause is kind of interesting as it correlates to many categories. And we found that we perform better than the baseline approaches in public speaking assessment or automatic public speaking assessment, and that we have difficulties in actually like giving direct feedback about performance and how it changes with respect to behavior directly as like a one-to-one measure, so to say. All right, we are already at 9 o'clock. I have another part for the perception of virtual audiences. This is Mathieu's work, so maybe he can talk about this on Monday, or I talk about this on Monday. Doesn't really matter, but we can take like a 7-minute break until 9:05 and then come back here for the discussion session. Or are there questions?